second order of business is that the women keep on winning and winning and winning, Ken.
Yeah, another victory. This time a huge win against Maine. And honestly, a bit of a shocker at how easy they made it look. Because Stony Brook came out the gate strong. And they went on a 14-0 run through the first several minutes of play. Ended up finishing the first quarter up 21-5. That was just unthinkable, in the era we just came from over the past several seasons.
Well, it's their first road win in conference play. It's their first road game in conference play. And correction on that. They lost to NJIT in the opener. Correction on that. And they're now 2-1 in the America East. Maine at 2-2. Maine, of course, had a very tough non-conference schedule, so their overall record, is 5-9. But this is a team that has historically been a thorn in Stony Brook's side. They are the main obstacle on the road to the America East title. And as a matter of fact, we faced them in the final. We've faced them in deep rounds in the tournament, and often they've been on the winning side. But more recently, it's been Stony Brook's favor. But to give you an idea, just take a look at the quarter-by-quarter breakdown, Ken. Stony Brook outscored 21-5 after one, and then Maine came roaring back in the third and made it a little bit more interesting. But Stony Brook then shut the door in the fourth quarter, outscoring them 19-9.
Yeah, big reason for that, too, in that second half was three-point shooting. And really, on Leah Moore-Wool, she stepped up with a couple of big threes back-to-back in that third quarter after Maine cut the deficit to 8. But it was shocking watching the Maine defense be just a step slower on Stony Brook throughout the whole contest. That's how the Seals were able to beat them, was through pure speed and utilizing their motion triangle offense.
Just to give you an idea, folks, if you have not seen the Seawolves, and I highly recommend that you do, Leah Moore-Wool is a front court player, and she hit two big threes.
Yeah. And she's best class cleaner or second best one behind India Pagan, and she hit a couple of big threes that shut down the comeback the Black Bears were coming into.
Yeah, so Ken, I was actually really impressed with the start for the women today. A 21-5 first quarter, like you had pointed out. You're always nervous when you're going up to Maine. Bus points. You're going to be a step slow with that kind of a travel. That kind of a trip. But yet they came out and they got it moving pretty early.
Yeah, agree, Greg. And on that topic too, just you're playing at Maine. Obviously, the crowd's going to be against Stony Brook. Maine's one of the hotter rivalries in women's basketball the past several seasons, and you're playing against Amy Vachon. 94-42 career record, 62-16 in conference play. So, a lot of success and a lot of accolades under her belt, obviously, including a couple of tournament appearances from 2017 and 2019. And this was the first time where, this Maine Stony Brook game really favored one team through virtually the whole contest in quite a while. Because a lot of these games have been real nail-biters back-to-back, And this is the first time where, Stony Brook was the one that came out strong. And they were just on the gas pedal, I think, through virtually all of the contest. A little bit in the third quarter, they slowed down, but they were just a step ahead of Maine. And it was surprising seeing just Maine on a transition and also just trying to motion and get to their player they're trying to defend, just being a step slow. And with those guards like Annie Warren, Erlette Scott, Gigi Gonzalez, they're going to beat you with speed.
Also, one thing that stands out for me in the box score is that in the second quarter, Stony Brook did outscore Maine 12-9, but their shooting from the field was abysmal. It was 2 for 11, and they made up for it on the line, 8 for 8 on 8 for 8 free throw shooting. But that's been par for the course for this team, and I noticed it a few days ago in their last home game. Is that they will often go into these cold streaks shooting, but often draw the fouls and make up for it on the line, and they are the best free throw shooting team in the America East, I believe, still. They had a streak going, and they're hitting quite a few consecutive free throws. That was broken in the first quarter, but 8 for 8 saved their quarter and made it, then kept them from falling behind it all. So very important now, especially as you get closer and closer to the end of the season, where a lot of these games are decided on the line.
I would agree with that. I noticed that right away when I was looking at the box score myself today. 21 made free throws. I mean, when you can get it at the charity stripe, that is really impressive. And I also think the way that kind of basketball has gone, I think we've almost cheapened the foul shot. We don't practice it enough. We don't work on it as much as maybe we did in decades earlier. But to watch the women do it now, it's really impressive. I really find that impressive to see.
Well, you and I go back to a time before the 3-point line.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, we are a few years apart in age, but you are. I mean, you do remember that far back, and the whole point there was the only way you earned 3 points was getting fouled and going to the line, the old-fashioned way, which the Seawolves are also pretty adept at doing themselves. And and people are bobbing threes all over the place. Well, if you get fouled going for 3, you get either a 4-point play or 3 free throws. So, still, the Seawolves have to keep that going because it's going to be an important part of the game as time goes on.
Right, Matt and Greg. And with that, too, first, 21 free throws they made, a season high for them, of course. But with that, too, their 3-point game, which is usually on point, right around the 30% mark, wasn't really there today.
10%, 2 for 12?
Yeah,
that's 1/6,
yep.
So 16%.
16%. But field goal wise, they were at about 37, and free throw wise, they went 21 of 28, good for 75%.
Yeah.
So when they got 2 of those 3 rolling, it's a tough team to beat. And as I said, you got guards like Annie Warren. She led the team with 15 points, led the game actually, 15 points, 7 of those coming off free throws, just because she was a step ahead of that main defense. And when you're cutting down the baseline under the basket, the other players attacking you, grabbing you, trying to get that ball loose. And instead, they're fouling Warren just because of her speed. And it's been one of the reasons why the Seawolves have found a lot of success this season, is through the guards just beating their defenders down low.
Now, as far as the America East Conference is concerned, that win that NJIT got against Stony Brook in the opener, well, that actually helps them because look who is at the top of the America East right now. NJIT with a 3-0 record. Stony Brook right behind them at 2-1. Albany's 1-0, a couple of games in hand, thanks to you-know-what. And they've won 5 in a row. The NJIT's won 4 in a row, and the Seawolves have won 2 in a row. But the most important thing here is that the Seawolves have kept pace despite that little setback to start off. And they're, again, we have to remind everybody, overall records look nice, and the Seawolves are 11-2, and that's great. But the conference record matters much, much, much more. And when you take a look at what's coming up for the Stony Brook Seawolves and just taking a look at their schedule, you have to basically make hay while the sun shines. And that's what they're looking at right now. Let me just call up the schedule here real quick because the internet's kind of slow here. Just a sec. Here we go. And
coming up for them for sure is the game against Vermont. Yep.
Okay. And home against Vermont Wednesday night, 6:55 here in WUSB, by the way.
Yeah, and that's going to be an interesting game because the record, obviously 1-1, can't take too much stock in it. But so far, through their first 2 games, Anna Olsen and Josie Larkins are one of the best scorers in conference play so far. Larkins averaging about 15 points and Anna Olsen averaging about 16.5 per contest. So, you have 2 of the better scorers in the conference that Stony Brook's going to be going up against.
And they are right behind them. Again, very early in the standings, and nobody's played more than 3 games. But you still see a big division here between top and bottom because the top teams are riding winning streaks. And Maine, of course, their winning streak got stopped because of Stony Brook. But you see UMass Lowell has lost 3 in a row. UMBC has lost 9 in a row. They haven't even started their conference schedules yet. Binghamton played 1 game and lost it. New Hampshire's lost 8 in a row. They're 0-2. Hartford's 0-2. Well, we already know about them. But the opportunity here for the Seawolves to pull out in front is definitely there. And the challenges are going to be there no matter what.
That's true. And for better or worse, just even though it's early in the season, you kind of do get that idea of, who are really going to be the competitors in conference play, contending for the conference title. NJIT, obviously, Maine's always a threat. Stony Brook now 2-1, and Vermont. Really the 4 that, step out, in my mind as, these are likely going to be the 4 contenders in that semifinal contest. We haven't seen much of Albany yet, but even so, it's just with the talent these teams have, it's definitely a step above what the bottom of the conference is dealing with, especially that Hartford squad that's going down to D3 in a couple seasons.
So as the schedule goes on, they'll take a trip to New Hampshire on next Sunday, and then they're back home against Binghamton and Albany, and then go back to Vermont 2 weeks later. Or 2 weeks from this Wednesday, they'll be back in Vermont taking them on again. So they'll get that conference series out of the way very quickly. But it is the America East, and even though the Seawolves are still the favored team, they got a little bit of a wake-up call to open it up that, at least NJIT didn't read all the news clippings, and they're saying, you got to get through us now.
I think it's an interesting balance when you look at when you get into conference play. You want to watch your team improve, but you also want to win games, right? And then especially in college basketball now, like you're talking about in the America East, you have to win the conference tournament in order to be the tournament. So, you want to put stock in winning now. And that's what you're here to do. You're here to win, but you also have to improve,
right?
So how do you do that now, especially right now in the intersession, where you're probably not taking classes. You can focus a little more on your basketball, and how do you improve in this next 3 week span? You got a good chunk of games. What are we working on in those next pieces to improve? So you get down the stretch. You start the season, you want to play well. By the end of the season, you want to be peaking.
Yeah, and you want it. And that's one thing that I think the people, and this applies to the pros as well, that the team at the beginning of the season versus the end of the season should be different. And not necessarily in terms of personnel, but that personnel should be better at playing together. They should be better overall. They should be improving some of their weaknesses. And development, of course, with a college coach and a high school coach, development is paramount. By your senior year, you should be a much better player than you were as a freshman. If you're not, something's wrong.
Yeah, and I think, well, you're definitely right about that. You've got 4 years to mature. When you look at somebody who's 22 years old as opposed to, a college athlete when they're 18 years old, that 22-year-old should just stand out. You should just be able to pick out the senior between the freshmen. But as the season goes on, I heard somebody say this one time, and I think it's really true. It's all practice until the playoffs. You want to go, you want to win, you want to be successful, but it's all practice.
But you don't want to know something?
Get there.
I've heard that same thing, but I will often counter that argument saying that seedings do matter. And if you're opening up your round as a 1 facing an 8, for example, that is a bit better in a 4 versus a 5, or if you're the 8 facing the 1. And, in the early days of D1, when we were just getting our feet wet in the America East, Jeff Bernstein, for example, would often say, don't worry about it. All that matters is the tournament. And I said, yeah, but when was the last time an 8 seed in the tournament won? He said, never. It's like, there you go.
Yeah, I think that's obviously a fair point, and I think that'll be determined a little bit when you look at that 8 and the 1 stuff. Even today when I was watching some of the NFL stuff, they were talking about this win and this win and this win, and that changes the seeding and how different that is. Now you have to play the number 1 seed. So you're definitely right about that. Or also,
sometimes this bad seeding helps you because you end up playing a team that you have a better record against. Go ahead.
If we can get back to the women's team for a second, the point I wanted to make here as well too, and Ken, you had brought it up with the shooting for the women today. Maybe not necessarily on, but you know what traveled with them? Their defense traveled with them.
Oh yes.
Right, they held the Black Bears to 21.9% shooting from the field and 23.1% from 3-point line. Right, and
that's big.
And then you add on top of that they out-rebounded them 46-26. Those are things that you can say, okay, we can build upon this. We don't have our best shooting game. We're not necessarily clicking from the field, but what can we do? Foul shots. We can play really good defense, and we can rebound. Those things are good no matter what you're doing, right? Any game that you're in, if you can bring those 3 with you, you're going to be successful in some facet.
Agreed. And it's big, too, because his main team, not the same as it was past couple seasons. Obviously, Blanca Milan being the biggest change, because she was just a superstar X factor in her own right. So with her gone, Ann Simon's the one that's been leading this Black Bears team. But even with that, it's still a main team that has that ability to produce 40, 30, 75 shooting splits. So for a Stony Brook team to do it again where they play really strong defense. Go back to the Hartford game, they held them to under 50 points as well. So for them to do that in consecutive games is a strong statement, and I think a great message to send bouncing back from that loss against NJIT.
Well, guess what? And I'm sure you guys know this, but I'm going to share it with the listeners. NJIT is not only 3-0 in women's basketball in the America East Conference, they are 3-0 in men's basketball as well. And they're in first place. However, there are two other undefeated teams in the America East, but they've only played one game each, Vermont and Stony Brook. And Stony Brook got its win against the now 0-2 Maine Black Bears. They've now lost 4 in a row. But 80-72 is that score, a game that aired here on WUSB on Saturday. And once again, the Seawolves doing what they need to do, and in particular, taking a big lead into halftime, and then all of a sudden, Maine started chipping away, especially down the stretch. They led by as much as 21 in the second half, the Seawolves did, but Maine came out with a big run to make it. I believe they got within 5, or actually even less than that. They got within 5.
6, I think.
6. Okay, they got within 6, and the Seawolves were able to pull it out. Elijah Alani and Tyke Green led the Seawolves with 16 points apiece. 5 players in double figures. And Alani also had 5 rebounds, 2 steals, and a big block. And that's not the first time the Seawolves won a game on a block.
Yep, that's right. And I think that was the best part of the game, was just seeing Elijah Alani return. So he missed the past 6 games due to a lower body injury, and he looked close to 100%. As a lead in the team alongside Green with 16 points and doing everything, which I think is huge because, Alani excelled on the offensive side during his first stint with the Seawolves. And I think since he's come back, although it's been a limited capacity, he's definitely looked more refined, downloads, cleaning the glass, and also defensively. And his performance was a big factor in that win, grabbing those 5 boards. And as they stated, a huge block to preserve the lead for the Seawolves.
Well, Tyke Green also led everybody with 9 boards.
He's been a great addition. Yeah.
Sam Ihe Kwaba. Unfortunately, Jake Meyer called the game yesterday and not me. But anyway, he had 9 boards as well. But Green had a great day. 6 for 11 from the field, 1 for 3 from 3. 3 for 4 from the line, 16 points for the Seawolves. And Anthony Roberts, again, good shooting, 7 for 14. Not as great from 3, but think about it, too. He was 1 for 6 from 3, which means that he was 6 for 8 from within 3. Yeah, so that's pretty good.
For Roberts, he went down pretty awkwardly during the middle portion of that game and couldn't put weight on his knee at first, but was able to jog off and was walking on the sidelines, so he seems to be okay for now. There's no update on his status. We don't think he's out, but especially with Elijah Alani returning, you don't want to lose another one of your key contributors. And Roberts was someone who really stepped up with Alani out in the scoring department. But along with Tyke Green, who's having a heck of a season so far, shooting 50% from the field overall, as well as knocking down 29 free throws, and rebound-wise, he has 106 rebounds so far this season.
Well, I'll tell you what, too, that within the arc, the Seawolves are fine. And their overall shooting for today was 46.7%, and they only shot less than 30% from 3. So they hit really well from within the arc. That means their down-low performance was strong. They were rebounding. They were doing everything they needed to do. Kind of more old-fashioned basketball, Greg. But the important thing here, too, is that they also earned it on the line. They were 16 for 20. That's good for 80%. And a very similar game to what the women played against their main women's basketball team. So, again, able to earn it the old-fashioned way. A concern, one aspect of their game still needs work, which is three-point shooting. And the Seawolves, throughout their history in Division I, or even ever since the three-point line was instituted, they've never been that strong a three-point shooting team. Every now and then they'll be good, but overall, not great.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Just not a forte for us right now. It's just something that and I guess the guys will improve upon. My take on the game as well, too, Matt, and you had brought this up. Well, first let's start with this. A long layoff for the Seawolves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a couple postponed games.
Right.
And then they come back in. Ken, you had brought up the fact that Olani comes back as well, too. So I thought the combination of two things made it an interesting game for me to watch. How are they going to rebound from missing a couple games? And then how are they going to play when you have a player like Olani coming back in, right? And I think they answered it right away. They came out of the gates and they were playing really strong. Matt, I'm going to jump on the point that you were making as well, too. With about 4 or 5 minutes left in the first half, they started to get sloppy.
Yeah.
You know, you start to see some turnovers, you know, some uncharacteristic mistakes from them. And then there was that ejection. I can't remember the player's name from Maine, but he elbowed one of the Stony Brook players. And from that ejection on, it seemed to get them going back in the first half and got them kind of moving in the right direction. So I thought that was a good sign for them. Playing well, hitting some adversity, getting a spark, and then coming back and playing good basketball after that.
And the same thing happened in the second half, where Maine started chipping away at a 21-point Seawolves lead. Seawolves started to get a little too comfortable, but the Seawolves again did what they had to do to hang on to it. And that, as a coach, with Gino Ford and his staff, he's got to be very happy with the fact that, okay, yeah, you built up a comfortable lead and you nearly frittered it away, but you came back, because usually when you have that big a lead against a team that's at your talent level, or a conference game in particular, they're going to make another run at you. And the object of the game there is to hold them off. And the Seawolves were adept at doing that. That's very important, because they're going to see that happen a lot, especially against, let's say, Vermont.
I think it's tough to hold your composure and hold your play for 20 straight minutes. You know, it's a long time to play a sport, so you're going to have lapses, and things are going to get sloppy. That's just the nature of a 20-minute half.
And the other side's just going to get hot sometimes.
And that's basketball.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes you're going to get cold, and sometimes they're going to get going.
And then, all of a sudden their top scorer drops a couple of threes, and they're right back in it.
But I do think you're right. I think Coach Ford really has to be pleased with that. You know, it's one thing to be playing well and to be rolling. But then when you get down a little bit, you don't love getting down as a coach.
No.
But when they get back up, that's what you love to see. So he had to be happy with that. You're never pleased with an overall game.
Naturally, you're always looking for things in the film. You're always going to... Well, first of all, no game is perfect, number one. No play is perfect. And mistakes happen all the time, and it's your job as a coach to point them out. And you're just trying to limit them, obviously. But you're also trying to make sure the guys don't get complacent either. And I think that was the case with the Seawolves, as you said, late in the first and late in the second. But they were still able to regain their composure, Ken, and hold them off.
Yeah, and it was Adedogun who was ejected, and he was one of the starting guards for Maine. So I thought that played a huge factor in Maine struggling, where you're down your two guard because of an ejection, and gave the Seawolves some extra points there as well. But you're right, coming off that long layoff in particular, for them to put up 80 points, I thought was pretty good. Giving up 72 points was a bit concerning for me, because this is a Maine squad where they're not one of the more talented offenses in the league compared to a team like NGIT or Vermont, or even UMBC. This Maine team still needs a lot of work on the men's side. So, I think for me, defense is where I want to see them improve as they progress, especially with a game against Vermont coming up soon.
Especially a game against Vermont, because that is this coming Wednesday, their first meeting against Vermont. And let's face it, again, since they entered the America East Conference, well, I will say that there's always been the rivalry with Albany, and Albany has stuck it to them a couple of times, as we know. But outside of that, early on, it was BU, and of course BU was consistently among the top. BU left for the Patriot League, and rising up in their place, even though they had been among the top teams all along, was Vermont. Because, what would happen? You get to the America East final, especially under Steve Peichel, they get to the final, and there was Vermont. And it wasn't until Jameel Warney basically took the team on his back and willed it to victory back in 2016 that they were able to overcome that. Well, it's now a little bit more even between the two teams, I think. And Vermont still tough, still dangerous, and still
Always when
is
you
going
got
to
John
be
Becker.
their biggest challenge so far.
Yeah, always when you got John Becker. And just looking at his head coaching at Vermont, the worst finish he's had in his 11-year tenure was third place. Okay, this is a guy who carries success with him and leads successful teams. So this Vermont team, a bit of a slow start now. Well, they haven't played much because of, obviously, COVID-19 precautions. But this is a team that's still going to be dangerous. And one where, defense is going to win this game. Because remember the last couple times the Seawolves played Vermont, the difference between winning and losing was from the defensive end.
Well, I'll tell you this, too. And I was actually, Jake Bazil, of course, is our hockey play-by-play guy. And he's a young guy, and I'm explaining to him the history of Vermont as a general rule, and our history playing them in other sports, too, but in particular basketball. And I said, picture this. Picture their local sports radio station talking about nothing but Vermont athletics, because that's what it's like up there. They have coaches' shows. That's all they do. They cover the high schools and University of Vermont up in Burlington. And, we've all been up to Burlington, and it's a great college town. And I kind of, missed the fact they gave up their baseball team back in 2009, because back in 2006, I was able to do an America East baseball tournament up there. And that was a great weekend. Even though the Seawolves didn't win it, Centennial Field up there, which is still used by minor league teams, was Vermont's home field. It's older than Fenway. So you can imagine late May, you got the no-seams flying around, and you see them in the lights, and you have a night game, and it's like you're in the middle of a scene from Bull Durham.
It's almost like you made a left-hand turn into 1950.
Exactly.
What a gorgeous... It is true. I was up in Vermont about 2 summers ago, and we purposely brought our children to the University of Vermont just because it is such a nice campus, and we walked them around and such. And it really is a really cool place to bring them. But Ken, I do think what you were talking about with Coach there is it's how he carries himself and how they carry themselves at Vermont. I really do think that there is, sometimes there's just a prestige for them. The way that they carry themselves. So I definitely felt that way when you had said that their success over the last 11 years, how successful they've been in the America East.
Especially against Stony Brook, Greg. 9 of the last 10 games have gone in Vermont's favor. And the one win was an 81-77 win back on January 8th, 2020. So, a lot of these games are headed in Vermont's favor, and they're usually about a 9-point difference.
So, coming up, well, first of all, they have to take things one game at a time, naturally. You cannot ask a coach or a player about New Hampshire on Saturday because they're thinking about Vermont on Wednesday. But we can, because they have a nice little homestand coming up right after the Vermont game, where they can, again, make hay while the sun shines with New Hampshire and UMBC. And UMBC, well, we have kind of a history with them, too. And that is the Martin Luther King Day game, because that is Monday, January 17th, and it's a 4 p.m. start. And that, is obviously unusual, but of course it's the Monday holiday. The Knicks, of course, do a game on Monday afternoon as well, and so do a lot of other NBA teams and a lot of college basketball teams as a rule. But opportunities do abound because they go through New Hampshire, UMBC, and Binghamton, and then on my birthday, January 22nd, they're up in Albany. And then Vermont again. So you got the two biggest nemesis of your America East existence in rapid succession, one on the road and one at home.
And I think this 3-game stretch with Vermont, UNH, and UMBC is going to be a great test for Coach Gino Ford and his squad, just because these are 3 teams where very recently, they've had Stony Brook's numbers. Each team has a 3-game winning streak on hand against Stony Brook. And I know, Greg, obviously you were a coach, and, having to strategize against teams to where, you have history with each other and maybe they've gotten the better of you 2 or 3 times in a row, it definitely changes and impacts kind of, I would assume, the play calling and just analyzing, preparing for an opponent.
As I look at the schedule for them right now, and you see Vermont, New Hampshire, UMBC, and it's Wednesday, Saturday, Monday. So you're looking at a bang, bang, bang situation. If I was coaching in these games, if I was Gino Ford, and I'm going to put that coaching hat on there, I'm probably in that stretch going to really focus on the fundamentals, because you don't have a tremendous amount of time to do some game planning. I mean, you can tweak a little bit and do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. We're going to play a little bit of zone. Are we going to play a little man-to-man? What are we going to do offensively? Sure. But I think that's a good time to really stress the fundamentals there. Very similar like we were talking about the women's team. They played good defense, they hit their foul shots, and et cetera, et cetera. What are we going to hang our hat on as the men's team? What do we think that we can do that can be the backbone of our team? And I think that's what will lean on in those 3 games, right? What are going to be our fundamentals? So there's a break, and then so for those 3 games, I don't know what it's going to be for, Stony Brook. With that, what are we going to be looking to do? Who's going to be defensively? What are we going to be trying to do? What's our strategy? I think they find themselves in those 3 games, right? And fundamentally so.
It's a great point.
There are stretches and schedules like that kind of define you as a team and set the tone for the rest of the year. Obviously, some things can force some change, like injuries, like COVID and what have you. But in terms of the type of team you are and the type of team you're going to present yourself to your upcoming opponents, that is a perfect stretch for, each team tests you in different ways. And as a result of that, if you do come through it, especially if you come through it winning all 3 games, first of all, your confidence is flying high, but you also find out what your real strengths are and what you can build on from there.
It's true. And what's working for this team, obviously, has been the free throw shooting, is getting to the line. So you got to think from an offensive standpoint. Number one is drawing a lot of fouls, not only getting to the line, but also getting some of the better players in foul trouble and hoping for mismatches on that front. But also, I think for this team, they're struggling in three-point shooting for the past couple games. And for them, I think if they're able to really pick it up and really be consistent from that front, then shooting as a whole is not only going to thrive, but it's probably going to lead them to a victory during that stretch. So for me, I would definitely look for those 2, and it's potentially an increase in, obviously, not only trying to draw fouls and get a lot of those contested shots in action, but also just 3-point game.
Going back to what, Greg, you said about the free throw being not necessarily de-emphasized, but not getting the glory it deserves, I guess is the best way to explain it. I'll turn back the clock to a couple of Hall of Famers. Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler played on the same University of Houston basketball team together. Got to the national championship game in 1983 and 1984. Phi Slamma Jamma is right. Okay, they had a whole bunch of other guys too, but 2 Hall of Famers there.
Sure.
But what happened was that Jim Valvano, one team that had no Hall of Famers, okay, well, first of all, I think it was actually in the Elite 8, Raleigh, Massimino, and Villanova kind of exposed it. These guys couldn't hit free throws on a bet. And even Guy Lewis, the coach at Houston, said, my team doesn't practice free throws. Like, they don't need to. And Syracuse under Jim Boeheim historically has had problems with free throws. They've gotten better in recent years because they finally smartened up. But even in that era, they definitely were bad. But so what does Jim Valvano do? Use up all his fouls and put them on the line. What does John Thompson and Patrick Ewing and the Georgetown team do the following year? Use up all the fouls and put them on the line. 10 years later, Hakeem gets his revenge in the NBA Finals against the Knicks. But it's one of the first things I learned. I remember I'm a senior in high school in 83, freshman in college in 84. That's where I learned the importance of coaching. It was in the early years of the Big East, and in those years, watching those teams and watching how the strings were pulled. And again, no three-point line in the NCAA tournament, no shot clock. Some of the conferences had them. I mean, the ACC three-point line went through, it was like 17 feet
right
at the top of the key. It went through the top of the key. It was ridiculous. But when they finally settled on 19-9, we didn't like it because why we didn't like it, the beauty of the three-point shot and the way the game has transitioned from above the rim with 7-footers just slamming the ball down to Steph Curry's taking shots from half court. Well, guess what? It has humanized the game because any one of us can hit a ball from 19 feet 9 inches and have done it a few times in pickup games. Okay? That's makeable. Anybody can do that. If they get really good at it, you're in the NBA. Not everybody is 7 feet tall.
And I think that it was, I have children myself, and I feel like when I watch my son and his friends play, that has become a big aspect for them. It's no longer pounding it down low and, step into the baseline and drop step and stuff like that. It's now who can hit from the outside, who can get their shot going.
But even if you watch an NBA game today, and you have, let's say the Brooklyn Nets, for example, where you have great front court players, what are you doing? Kicking it back out.
Yeah. I do want to bring up, you made a really good point with the Houston Cougars and the NC State team.
Wolfpack.
Yes. For the America East, when they face Vermont, New Hampshire, and UMBC, what do they do to Stony Brook? Because they're going to know their strengths as well, too, that they can get the ball inside, they're good from the foul line. How are they going to attack Stony Brook to get them to, get out of their game?
Push them out. I'd say push them out to the perimeter. Because as the women have been inconsistent from three-point range, so are the men. And you push them out to the perimeter and challenge them. Okay, we're going to plug up the middle, and you got to hit it from out there in order to keep us honest.
And then what does Stony Brook do in response to that? And I think
draw fouls, go to the line.
Yeah, and I think that's a great learning experience for them.
Ken?
No, I absolutely agreed. And just looking at their recent losses to these three teams, that's exactly what's happened, where the opponents have pushed them, outside from the paint. And not only are other teams outscoring Stony Brook from inside the paint, they're shooting better because they're pushing them outside, forcing Stony Brook to take contested shots. So they're definitely going to have to adjust and be a step ahead of the opposing defenses and really, especially utilize the screens more so now, or engage and get guys open on the corners, on the wing.